Hello, everyone. My name is Biringkpa. I am the host of the podcast Boring Conversations. On this episode, I had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Nimi Wariboko. He's a professor at Boston University in the United States. We talked extensively about a whole lot. We had conversations about the current economic situation in Nigeria. We talked about how situations have become what they have become in Nigeria today. We talked about the different conversations in and about corruptions, in and about the magical system we've come to build for ourselves. And Professor gave us a perspective as it concerns how we should look at the idea of magic and how that gets to affect our society and how that gets to affect the ways in which we tend to live life and lead life. Professor Nimi also talked about the eventualities that saw to it that he became the prize winner for the Abiola Peace Prize and how he came to meet Abiola and how he landed his first job. He talked about them here, his era, being amongst those who first got to experience unemployment at the dawn of the dethronement of Shagari and the overthrow of that government and Buhari taking over powers in the 80s. The conversation spanned a whole lot. He's proffered solutions to the many problems we have in the country. And at the beginning of such solutions to be gotten, the idea of the ethos, the idea of ethics is a thing Professor Nimi opines that we get to go look back at. Whether you're a Christian or you're a Muslim, we have to go back to that drawing board. We have to talk about ethics, and we have to talk about the conversations about this. The conversations spanned over 1 hour, 26 minutes, roughly an hour and a half, and it's what all the time. What am I saying? Welcome to Boring Conversations. Welcome to today's episode of Boring Conversations. I am your host, Biringkpa, and today we are honored to have Dr. Nimi Wariboko with us. Doctor is a distinguished scholar and professor of the Walter G. Muelder Professor of Social Ethics at Boston University. His academic work has spanned a whole lot of generations, a whole lot of decades now into what we have at the moment. Doctor has spent time in Nigeria. He's been in the banking sector. He has written extensively about the Calabari and the economic system that was down there way before what we now tend to term the current era of the colonial era. And it's a very fascinating research he did down there. At the point, it was surprising for him also that his people had such an innovative way of ordinarily settling dispute and looking at things. His academic research also spanned Christian social ethics, African social traditions, Pentecostal studies, and philosophical theology, if I should say so. Professor's groundbreaking research has led him to explore the complex relationship between theology and economics, as well as the impact of Pentecostalism on contemporary African society. You get to hear Professor talk about aesthetics in a Pentecostal way of worshiping and the summoning of a word in Latin is termed diabolo. Diabolo here will mean the devil, and how people get to interact with him in and about that. He's also a scholar, and he has also edited a couple of works in and about the Protestant theologian Paul Tillich. Tillich is a theologian I get to respect in many ways. And these relationships get to span from professor's work, and you get to see him do a whole lot of stuff with his research and the ways in which he get to carry out his conversations in books like God and Money. You get to see Prof examining the role of finance in shaping global systems advocating for theology of money. And you might already be wondering what theology of money mean. At a point in this conversation, we will get to see what that means and how money can be used to promote social justice. Into those conversations, we will be looking deep into his views on African social traditions and governing structure of his own part of the world, as I've mentioned earlier, the ethics of financial systems, and the challenges facing contemporary African government. Will be taking off from Nigeria and we'll be looking at broader perspective. We'll also explore his unique concept of the idea of a craft, whether it's a soul craft or the statecraft, and conversations about that. And this conversation will be guided by Prof himself. We would be listening at his foot to get to learn more. Stay tuned as we unravel these pressing issues with one of the leading voices in economic ethics and social justice with a touch of theology. Professor, thank you for granting me the chance to talk to you.
Thank you, sir, for allowing me to come on your show.
You've done a whole lot of stuff from, at a point, banking, and then you've touched on theology, you've touched philosophy and all that. If we were to go back at where all this started from, your pedigree, how probably you were back in Nigeria, at what point did you feel like you're going to do all of this? Did you look at it from a spectrum, like a vision, as many persons get to do, or it came technologically using different epochs of your life?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, my own interest or leaning towards transdisciplinarity, or you can say interdisciplinary studies, was provoked by my undergraduate training. I studied economics at the University of Harcourt, where I got first class in economics. And so I was at the University of Harcourt from 1980 to 1984. At the time we were there, the university, or at least the School of Social Sciences, had a vision that, given the paucity, the scarcity of African experts or development experts, and also given the fact that the country is not rich, it's poor. And so if the country is investing in training the future technocrats or scholars or intellectuals, that these people should be educated very broadly so that they are flexible to respond to the needs of Nigeria. So the way the program ran was that in the first 2 years, as an economics student, you take classes in anthropology, sociology, history, a little bit of sciences, general science knowledge, geography. I could do all that. So that requires you. So then, of course, in that period, we are doing some economic classes. It was only in year 3 that we concentrated on economic courses. But even at that, you have a broad-based economic education from development economics to financial economics to economic history. So we did all that. So that is what prepared me. So I came of age. I mean, when I graduated, I began to look at knowledge or knowledge seeking, not through a narrow path, but through a kind of very wide perspective that I can draw in many fields, many disciplines to make sense of the situation in front of me, to understand the problem I'm trying to address. So that is what basically laid that foundation. So from the age of 18 to 22, I was immersed in this interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary approach to knowledge. And the whole point is Africa needs experts, but we don't need, of course, at that time, we believed that we didn't need experts that were one trick pony. They can only do one thing. You've got to be able to do several things, at least as much as possible, in order to push the development agenda of your country forward. So that was my basic formation, that laid the foundation for my interest today in transdisciplinary studies.
That's a broad perspective down there. And what was life like studying in Port Harcourt then. At a point, like I think 6-7 years ago, I spent a short period of time in Obigbo, but at the Obigbo of now, what many persons call Oyibo, is different from what probably you must have experienced, and probably Transekulu and all that also will be different. What was life like then in school, and what has really changed so far? I don't know if you have any idea.
Well, I mean, I left University of Record 41 years ago.
Oh,
A lot would change, but at least in terms of security now, yeah, it's not the same thing as back then. What we have then and what we have now. So security have changed, but also at that time we had lecturers, professors who were globally known, or at least aspiring to that global pedestal, and they took time to fuel the curiosity for learning. We were exposed to thinkers from different parts of the world, from Africa, from Latin America, from Europe, and from the United States. So we got to meet some of the greatest thinkers through their books while we're there. So that curiosity was there, and we are trained to also believe in the fact that the black man was not inferior to anybody. Because remember, if you look at my generation, we were about the first set of Nigerians born after independence. Like, so people who were in school with me were either born 1961, 62, 63, 64, 65. I mean, in the 4 year period. So we were born in the post-colonial era. And we are largely taught by Nigerians from primary school to the university level who had that fervency for African development, for Africa's independence. So when we got to a school like University of Harcourt, it was conscious of this role that it was molding the first set of Africans to be born outside the colonial era, and that first set that got into university. Because people that go to university, if you look at the age 18, most of them were born, if they entered 79, they were born in either 1961, 62. And so I was born in 1962. So we were trained that way to understand Africa. And there was a certain sense of urgency. So when you were studying, when you were learning, you were not only learning just, I want to get a big job, I want to get a big pay, but you're also acquiring knowledge that you know that will uplift your own people, will uplift your own government. And that was the way we studied. And at that time, the idea of having an anxiety over job, who would not believe didn't exist. It didn't exist that much. Because after the time I was in year 4, companies were coming on campus to recruit people. So they will recruit you and give you a job before you go to a youth corps. And when you come back from a youth corps, within 6 months, they will give you a car loan or something, and you buy your first 504, and you also get an apartment, right? But so we were under the impression, so it was not job, it was learning. But unfortunately, by the time I got to my year 4, all that have stopped. So once again, I was in the first generation of Nigerians to experience graduate unemployment at a very serious level. Because by the time I go to year 4, all those companies have stopped coming. Then in my year 4 in December, Buhari overthrew Shagari, the civilian government, and then we went into austerity. But before then, Shagari had declared austerity. So by my year 3, we knew that the country had changed. And so when I finished my youth corps, even though I had a first class, I couldn't get a job. And I stayed, for the first time, I stayed 1 year at home between 85 July to 86 August. About 13 months, I had no job. And that was the beginning of this graduate year unemployment. So I saw that kind of massive change within 4 years in my life. And so I got a job, and at some point in Nigeria, if you ask older people who were reading newspapers and aware, by 1986 or so, I was the poster boy. My face was the face that was splashed in newspaper to tell the country that we've entered a new era of serious graduate unemployment. Why do I say so? I finished at the first class. I stayed 1 year at home. Then MK Abiola Concord had an essay competition, and I made a submission and won one of the prizes. So Abiola then flew me from Port Harcourt to Lagos to take the award. And then in the midst of the award ceremony, he found out that there was a first class graduate in economics. I've served his youth corps. He had a job. And he was so shocked that there and then on the spot, he gave me a job in his newspaper. So my first job was journalist. And then there was a picture of me and him on the first pages of newspaper, especially the Sunday Concord and the next day, the Monday Concord. My face was there. The story made news because now people came to realize more than ever before that here you have somebody, a Nigerian, a young Nigerian at the age of 22, graduated from university, did everything that was right, got to first class, but just couldn't find a job. It hit many people hard that the country has come to this point where even someone who had the first class couldn't get a job. Because in those days, if you had the first class, you couldn't get a job in the government or the oil sector or the banking, your university will give you a job as a graduate assistant. That by 1985 has been frozen. So people were really shocked, and I'm surprised that now that story hit Nigeria 86, right? And that is 85. So 39 years has passed. The situation has deteriorated everywhere. So to come back, the employment situation has deteriorated, the security situation has deteriorated, and the physical infrastructure or the viability of our cities have also deteriorated. So the question you asked me, what has happened? I would say it's all been going down one way or the other. And so people who are under 40 or who came much up don't know what the country was and what the current leaders and politicians have done to them. So I'm telling this story. Some of them will think that, 40 years ago, your generation had the right. I was the poster boy for graduate unemployment. And I will go to places, they'll say, yeah, I saw you with a fellow on the news. That was me, and I had a first class. And those days, it was very difficult to get the first class. I got the first class in economics, yet I stayed 1 year at home after serving my youth corps in Harcourt College of Education, Owerri. I didn't have a job.
It's quite unfortunate that things took that particular turn, and the price ordinarily catapulted you to where you were. And at that time, 90s, in and about now, many things have happened in Nigeria. In and about you moving from journalism, you moved to the economic sector and you did a whole lot of stuff down there. And then from there, you moved again to theology, thanks to the broad spectrum upon which you guys were trained and raised. The mission and the goal of our fathers in and about post-independence Nigeria, has it been achieved? Because if you look at the first set that went to the University of Ibadan, you find Chinua Achebe, you find this particular set that went down there. And my grandfather also told me this experience of, he studied at the University of Ibadan. There was no need to have this clamor for getting jobs. You just go to school, have fun going to school from Mokola to you travel to different places by bus, you go to Shagamu, you live your life as a student. And then on getting your certificate, you become employable. And at the time you ordinarily were supposed to have that, it all stopped. The question is, where did we get it wrong in the implementation of the dreams of the likes of Kenneth Kaunda, carrying the burning torch of the likes of Nyerere and all that, particularly in Nigeria? At what point did we get it wrong? I know you talked about Shagari and the government being overthrown by Buhari, and we know what happened to the universities, to the different institutions that were in and about that time, the whole idea of discipline and or whatnot, and universities were closed, people went on strike, there were so-called educational reforms and budget cuts here and there, and a kind of authoritarian control. Where did we really start losing this, and what was the implication? What has been the effect of such derail, if I should say?
Well, you packed so many questions into one. But if you say, where everything started, beginning or origin always is problematic because every beginning has a beginning. Every
Yeah,
origin,
it's just like you look at history from hindsight.
has a reason. But if you look at the literature, the class that took over power from the departing colonial masters, like Zik, Awo, Tafawa Balewa, Ahmadu, but and their economic, they are not really, if you look at books already, they are not really committed to to African development. They mounted the fact of development, but from everything that they did, they were interested in strengthening their material base, and they began to see the state as an instrument of class struggle, and the state was a means of production. How do we acquire wealth? Remember, Zik, Awo, Ahmadu Bello, they were all one way or the other either legally indicted or morally indicted for some of their practices before independence, right? Yeah, they did do some good here and there, but they were not really committed to Africa's development. They were more or less like petty bourgeoisie or a bourgeoisie that were aligned to the global colonial powers, and they just put them there to survive. So that idea of they were talking about development, but they were never really interested in mobilizing the masses full force to achieve that development because the masses would have questioned their lifestyle, their character of accumulation of capital. So these are the things they were there. And of course, the issue of ethnicity came in. They did, hardly any one of them had a vision of Nigeria as one country. They were either in support of one ethnic group or the other, or one religion or the other. So Nigeria, they didn't lay a very good foundation for Nigeria. And let us not forget, it's this kind of bickering and corruption that led to the first Inzogu school. So let us not romanticize that era because it was a bad, the whole question of bribery and corruption and this infighting led to that school. Of course, that school had its own aftermath. It probably many people say it created more problems than it solved. And we are in this situation. So we will not be fortunate to have leaders who are committed to the development of Africa. We will not be fortunate to have leaders who see the citizens as assets, not as obstacle to their accumulation. Yeah, so we have leaders who think that to spend money on the citizen is a waste of their money. But that money doesn't belong to them, it belongs to the state because the less they can spend on the citizen, the more they will have to accumulate. So the issue is Nigeria has never been fortunate to have forthright and committed leaders at the top who are bent on developing Nigeria. Like, I'm surprised because when I was in the university, we studied economics, both neoclassical economics and Marxian economics. And I didn't believe that 40 years after I've left school, Nigeria will still be where it is. We thought, look, things were going on well, right? And to see that we are where we are today is worse than where we are. Like the standard of education in the universities have deteriorated. Now you go to the ocean, in one room you have 10 people sleeping. When in those days we used to be two, we used to start from two, then went to three to four. Now you have like dozens of people sleeping, and the textbooks are not there. Professors cancel classes, they don't come to classes, and even the professors are not being paid very well. So they're all suffering. And so you ask yourself, where do we wrong? And we knew that our population was increasing. We didn't create the necessary infrastructure, the kind of things that we do, and the security situation. In those days, I was University of Port Harcourt in 1983 when we were doing the 100 years anniversary um, um, of the death of Karl Marx. Also, there was a conference at ABU Zaria, and we wanted to go and meet the intellectuals there, like Bala Usman and so as young people, and we took a bus from Port Harcourt, drove all through the night, and landed at Ahmadu Bello. The student hostess gave us place to sleep, told us where to eat, yeah, or so. And we attended the conference, rubbing shoulders with some of the greatest Mazi scholars in Africa. Now, you don't dare travel all through the night from Port Harcourt to Kaduna on a bus. I mean, no one would advise you because you're not sure you arrive at your destination alive. So you see, a lot, have changed, and the level of intellectual discourse about this. So I feel that the present youth, anybody say 30, 40, 50, the country completely failed your generation and robbed your generation of the things that you should enjoy. When we were going to school before then, no one was thinking of finishing school and going to look for a job abroad. You're going to look for menial job just to survive. No, you look for a fortune in the country. Right? And then if you have scholarship, people will go abroad to do masters or so. But people felt there was hope in the country. But also, it was from my generation coming that we began to go massively to the embassies to seek employment. That the British embassy, which should be on Awolowo Road in Lagos, used to create a problem, and all this discrimination, the way we are treated started. It started with my generation because we came of age in the 80s, where we're in our 20s and there was no job, and we began to massively look for ways of leaving the country. It was so bad by 1983, 84, that when Buhari took over power, he had a national advert. Say, Andrew, is it Andrew or so? There was an advert of a young man trying to leave the country, and Buhari government had an advert say, don't leave the country. So you can see the exodus have started by 1983. So much that the government had an advert, Andrew, don't leave the country, right? And so, but then it has not stopped. So a country that is leading its citizens, some of its best and greatest citizens, for continuous 40 years, we have serious problem. And for many of these people, there's no clear way of giving back to the country. Like, so a lot of the doctors are left. They were trained in Nigeria. Like, I told someone, for somebody like me, of course, I go to the summer to do. But I said, Nigeria trained me up to my first degree. We didn't pay school fees. We didn't, initially, we paid only fee right? Less than 1 naira per meal to eat. And you go there, they serve you meal, egg, ice cream, or so. When we did, of course, they gradually raised the money. So if you look at it, basically, the country invested in people in my generation, right? And trained us. Now we all moved abroad. The question is, what did we give back? What did the country gain from us? What has the country gain from us? Because you see, that's a bad management, that you train people, you invested in them, and thousands, millions of them left, and they're not giving back. Of course, someone will say today, the way we are giving back today is because we are remitting our earnings back. So there are billions of dollars that Nigerian diaspora are giving back. Yes, in that case, in that sense, we are giving back. But it also troubles many people like me to say, in addition to the giving back, what if I'm in Nigeria training the next generation of intellectuals and professionals, rather than training people in America, from China, from all over the world, contributing my passion to the development of their labor, their technology, and their intellectuals, because that's what we're training, right? So why would it have made more difference if People like me are in Nigeria trying to raise the next level of intellectual engineers, scholars, whatever it may be. But we're here sending only money. Is that the best way to contribute to Nigeria? Is Nigeria satisfied that each professional, a good number of each professionals are abroad, just sending money? Because that interaction, if I'm in the village, or in Nigeria, I'm not only interacting with my students. When I go to the village, I'm also interacting with the students in the village, right? That may inspire one or two, because I knew I was inspired to read and make something out of my life, because I could meet people in my village, in my town, and I aspire to be like them. But when you leave a community and what the youth are seeing are all 419 people, or politician is the model, or the pastor who can build a big church to get money, is what, if these are the models that inspire the youth, then if these are the only models, then we have a problem. And we are surprised that the country is going down. It's because of this lack of moral exemplars, lack of professional exemplars, because we need a broad-based set of exemplars so in order to inspire the youth to greatness. But that is not what we're having in Nigeria currently.
Sometimes, unless one goes to the archives to get to look at things, one might not know how bad things have become and how dissatisfying things are. And it's very important, Prof, that you are touching on things such as the people look out now as role models, the glorification of what the Bible will call mammon, and how everybody's focus is now channeled towards the bag and making the money. But then when you get to that particular place and you have the money, you ordinarily can buy what you are sold. What is sold around your area is what you will come to buy. And I remember going through the archives at the University of Ibadan, the National Archive, and the one also in Calabar. You get to see MEMSA. You get to see the war against indiscipline raised by Buhari, and the conversations down there. And you begin to ask, at what point we ordinarily would come back to where we are supposed to be, because you also see there were conversations about go back to the land. Then people were moving away from agriculture. We are oil was still booming, of course. Mining had taken the backstage, and everybody was just solely depending on oil and all that. But also in our times now, the youths are told to look up to these figures who ordinarily, we don't know the source of their wealth. So their wealth without enterprise. And if you don't get to go into this, or if you don't get to look up to these people, depression is thrown towards your way. You are looked at as a failure. And one way or the other, you also see this in the church. So you get to see this idea of looking towards these places, and even the whole idea of going back to the roots, or going back to our roots, championed by a couple of persons. I asked some very basic questions. Things like, what is the theology they are going back to? What is the anthropological base they are going back to, as opposed to, rather than going to appeal to our gods, to one way or the other make them wealthy without also them doing anything. Recently, Aqua is still in detention in Anambra, and a couple of other native doctors that were arrested by the Anambra state government because of this get rich quick scam. And you get to see it all over social media. Celebrity native doctors, celebrity custodians of culture and tradition. People don't look at things like the Omu institution, the whole idea of standing for integrity and all that. Even the idea of going back to the root that many persons have championed in different ways by way of African Renaissance is not also channeled towards the right direction. And there's a particular quote that I will never forget in reading Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's collection of short stories, the Stubborn Historian. One of the stories down there says, the gods used to drink palm wine. But at the advent of the white man, the God changed to snaps and dry gin. So is that what we are seeing in Pentecostalism, in Catholicism, in a religious environment as an economist? How much does the economy affect the ways in which we go about interacting with God and interacting with our sense of religiosity?
Yeah, so two ways is that first, does the economy serve as the price system, does it serve as a signal to allocate the resources? That is number one. I'm going to explain that. Number two, what is the role of ethos, of virtues in supporting economic development, right? So that is these are the two ways I want to handle your question. You see, when people say people are going to the native doctor for get quick wish or magical way of making money, let us not forget that the whole capitalist system in Nigeria is organized as a form of magic. Because why it is because let's understand. It's not that the indigenous religion is imposing magic on the modern. It's the modern that is sustaining and stimulating the magic in the indigenous. Why am I saying so? Because Nigeria is a system where I, you are seeing a person today. Tomorrow he or she knows the head of state, and it goes from having only 1,000 in his account to being a billionaire overnight. Now, is there no interesting, stimulating magic than that? That the one that you know your neighbor that is poor suddenly overnight has become rich, or the guy that was just poor borrowed money to do an election, and then a month after the election he's put up a mansion, he's going on vacation. So now, what is more magical than that? Right. So the modern system itself is occultic and magical, and it fuels magical orientation in the way the society works. Because, and this brings me to the point, right, where the easiest way to make money is to capture the state. When it captures state power, you can give a lot of contract to your friends, you can do this, and you can create a lot of millionaires. The Nigerian president or governor is so powerful that he or she can create millionaires, even in dollars, as often as they wish, because they are not accountable to anybody. So in Nigeria, to go buy raw materials, process it, sell it, and do all that, it takes enormous time, and you deal with different tax offices, regulatory offices, punishment, or so. So it takes your time, but it's easier if you donate money to a politician, he wins, and you get your cut. So you see, so the modern system fuels this magical orientation or quick way of making money, and then those who don't have access to that modern gimmickry, to that modern way of making money, then go to say there's also another way of creating magic. And then they go to the traditional side because it's money rituals or whatever they are doing. But we have to remember is the modern system, the ease with which is to make money, because there are no set rules also that is creating that. So in Nigeria, prices do not function as signals to let us know how to allocate economic resources, right? Because one of the functions of a price system is to enable you allocate resources as an economy. So if price of goods are high or there's more profit here, entrepreneurs will move into it, right? And the whole system. But where pricing doesn't mean anything, as a matter of fact, people that are selling and being rich, right? If you know the government, they can impose tariff on your goods. Say, let's no one import sugar because you are producing sugar alone, or let's no one import cement. Also, so you make money through those kinds of resources. So you don't really care about prices, the movement of prices. You just care about bringing the product to the market and getting your money because you are operating behind a monopoly stuff, or it didn't be pay custom duties by your competitors paid custom duty. So the economic system does not function as a real capitalist system or market system should function. So a lot of people who are in Nigeria who make money are not capitalists in that historical sense of people who risk their capital, produce something, and bring it to the market and face the terror of a market system where prices keep moving up and down. So they don't have that. So you see, I'm trying to where the magical system is.
It just reminds me of the case in Senegal where the CSS in charge of sugar production mounted the monopoly about producing sugar in and about from 1972 up until now. There's still that controversy of the monopoly as to how things are done down. The tariffs are mounted on other persons who want to import sugar and all that. So it's left for a particular group of persons down here. You and I, we don't happen to live in a country like that where you can sit down here, you can plan your vacation. Summer is coming. You can say, "Oh, I want to go to France." I check the price. I check the way things are run in, let's say, Lombardy, or let's say in Prague, or let's say in Warsaw or Frankfurt and all that. You plan ahead with speculations of what can work, plus or minus 2, 3, 4 euros or $5, depending on the country's currency and acceptance of the dollar. But we don't have such back home. Is there an economic model at this point in time we can use to ordinarily champion that? Because there's one question people get to ask is the idea of it's like it's too late to ordinarily make any change because people are so overwhelmed, like Sisyphus rolling that boulder. They're like, it's so much, and so let's just leave it. Let's just forget it. Should we forget this stuff, or should we look at economic models we can adapt and see how we go with that?
Yeah. So if we want to adapt the capitalist system, let's run a proper capitalist system, not kind of a state capture for power.
So, Prof, what will a proper capitalist system for Nigeria at the moment look like?
First is that we have to make sure that we reduce corruption, that people don't find the state as the easiest means of making money. They should make their money through the market system. But as long as we have these favors and the way that the governor will steal billions of naira or even billions of dollars, and it's not accountable to anybody, then the incentive everybody will go towards the easiest point of making money, right? And so until we tackle, I've written essays to show that the greatest obstacle to Africa's economic development is not actually in the economy. It's not in the people. It's the politics. Politics is the greatest obstacle to economic development. In Africa, it's dangerous for you to be in the wrong party. If you're in the wrong party, away from the ruling party, they can crush your business. They can make things difficult for you. So everybody is trying to go to the ruling party. That's why governors keep crossing the carpet, because if you're in the ruling party, like in Nigeria, if you're under APC, then you can do whatever you want, and the EFCC will not come after you.
Someone has said that at one of their campaigns. If you want to run away from, if you don't want EFCC to come your way, come to our party. And you saw the likes of Godwill Akpabio and a couple of persons defected just to save their head.
Yeah. So if you run in that kind of system, then how do the people know this thing? So the person doesn't need to produce yam and figure out what is the cost of yam in New York that I can sell to the diaspora there, or I can sell it on the shell. So all you need to do is to capture. As long as you have that incentive, young people coming in will do that. That's why businesses are collapsing, and then churches are growing too. A church, you need to come in and preach prosperity gospel, frighten the people, and you make money, and you take over the factories that have been abandoned, right? So so when you don't have a properly functioning market system, and you don't have a socialist revolution, which is other alternative, then we are stuck in that middle. But Sisyphus may be pulling the boulder back and forth. But it's because it's one person. If we as a community come in, we blow that ball away, we don't have to lift it up, and we have a free way to go up and down on our development ladder. So Sisyphus, the example is important, but remember, he's condemned and it's a law to doing that. But if we community come and help him, we don't need to pull it down. We need to throw it out of the way completely. And again, who punished him? It was the God, right? But we the people, are our own gods. And so who is going to negotiate with us? But we've yielded that position to the big man, big woman in Nigeria. They have now become gods to us and they're dictating to us, right? So to come back and finish your earlier question, then the issue of the ethos. Now, so how do we go back and begin to understand whether the culture, the ethos, the norms, and the mores of African society that we can bring up today, polish, elevate to suit our current needs. In short, this is one of the things that moved me away from studying just economics and finance. My first was in economics, the second was in finance. And so I was really interested in economic development. Then I came to realize that, look, until we understand economic ethics, we understand ethics, we understand ethos, and how that affects society. No society has developed by completely abandoning its ethos or not trying to work out an ethos system, right? So Max Weber in the Protestant Ethics and the Spirit of Capitalism clearly showed the importance of the Protestant ethics in creating the kind of capitalism. Yeah, his theory is narrative, right? Yeah, they are wrong. But the core of his argument that an economic system, a capitalist system, needs some form of ethos. And the Chinese have also realized the importance of Confucianism in creating that, because you cannot sustain an economic system that is not based on some kind of ethos and norms. In Nigeria, that we've never considered that. So I remember telling my economist friend that I'm doing a PhD in economic ethics. They will always look at me as a waste of time. Who cares about ethics? But we're seeing that in Nigeria, it's not that we don't have the brains to develop. It's not that we don't have the resources to develop. But where is the ethos that inform our behavior? Where is the ethos that inform our politics? And so you find out that in addition to the deterioration of our economic indices, right, our value system have also completely deteriorated. No one wants to work and put in the effort to acquire a skill. People would want to use anything they have to make money without going through any process of pain. For instance, I can't just imagine why would somebody pay a lecturer to have a degree that he cannot defend. I mean, are you really, you think you are doing it to another person, it's to yourself. You cannot defend. Why pay to have a PhD that he cannot defend, or he cannot even produce a good quality essay that a master student in other parts of the world can produce, right? Until we have that. And part of it is that in in Chagari's time, he realized that the economy was going down. So he had a new program, a ministry called Ethical Revolution. Right? To say, look, we cannot develop Nigeria without paying attention to our ethics. Of course, he didn't do it very well, he didn't take it serious. But imagine that the ethics in the 1980s was bad. Consider what it is today in relation to our need for development, or in relation to have good education, even in our hospital system, right? The way we treat patients, even our businesses, the way they treat their customers. So you could see this issue of ethos, norms, ethics. In many places, these things have gone terribly wrong. And that's why we need to pay attention not only to the technical indices of development, we need to pay attention to the ethical indices of development. These two need to come together. And that is how we need to reform our economic system so that we can go forward and create a flourishing system. Those that took power from Britain and the British colonial government were not interested in human flourishing for everybody in Nigeria. They were interested in Britain was interested in extracting resources from Nigeria for its own good and dumping their goods in Nigeria. We have leaders who come in and still have that same mentality. They see Nigeria as a way to extract wealth for their personal aggrandizement. And then they take those wealth, the money, and they put it elsewhere in Europe or in America. And the funny thing in Nigeria is that they do not pay any price. The people that steal our money work with us every day in our community, and they don't pay any price. No one has even bold enough to meet them on the street and slap them. Why? I mean, so and then they'll come back to the next election, they'll win again. So when you have an economic system or a society where people do wrong and there's no penalty of any sort, then it's an impetus for them to continue to do the evil that they do because they do not pay any cost and they're not afraid of anything. They have this absolute immunity, right? But let me tell you a story. In my research, I've shown in the Joy area, collaboration, and in other places, right? Africans even used to hold their gods accountable. The gods could not do whatever they want. So in my culture, we have a saying, and I found out that the Igbos have a similar saying. The Yorubas, they said, if a god becomes too furious, too demanding, he was powerful. They will hold you. And I was doing research in Liverpool Slave Museum in Britain. This was 2008 or 2009. I was there doing research. I've had this proverb, and it sounded like it was always a proverb. I said, "Oh, this is what the elders say." I didn't know that it was real. I came across a diary of William Oates, written in 1857. He said he was in the Calabar area of Rivers State today. And he said at that time, they had Shak. Shak was a deity, like Shak was a physical embodiment of a particular deity, right? You go to the Southern African religion world. But they found out that recently, they've been having too many Shaks attack on their children when they go to swim. And they said, Shak, we hold you are a representative of our deity, and therefore we treat you very well. But you are forgetting yourself. You are now eating our children. They just called the community together, and one day caught a shark and ate the shark. And they now made a rule that from that day on, shark is not more the angel of any god. Shark is not a god. Anywhere you find sharks, ate it. Because the shark become too demanding. The shark forgot himself. He thinks because he's a god that he can punish us. But they told him that every power in Africa depends on the social relationship. If those who bow down to you, or those who reverence you or do anything for you, respect you as subjects or as followers, if you break that bond, you are finished. But today, our leaders behave with more impunity than the gods themselves, and we, the descendants, the children of the ancestors that could not even spare gods for transgressing certain moral boundaries, we have today acquiesced to this our fellow human beings, treating us as if we are nothing. And that's why the system continues, because those who are in power or who exercise arbitrary power, they don't face any consequences. And that is where we are today. So part of reforming the economic system is also to reform the moral system that is foundation to every form of economic civilization.
Professor, it's a whole lot you've unpacked down here, and it reminds me of coming to look at Plato's Republic for the first time. Mm-hmm. The very first play you meet down there, the very first book 1 and book 2, I think it's between Crito and Apologia. And in and about these two, you get to see why Socrates did what he did. And I have asked different philosophy professors, what really happened to Socrates? Was it a case that Plato needed to tell us that somebody had to die or it was born out of real conviction. And I think I was like 16 when I first read the Plato's dialogue, and it left a lasting impact on my person and on my conscience, because no conviction could ordinarily pull this old man from what he was about to do. And he had all the chance to get to escape, and he had all the chance to leave, but he got himself so tied to his ethical stance. And it was up until now, I still feel there's a point where we ordinarily can still come back and look at our lives down here, because he was given all the chance to get to leave. He was given all the excuses you ordinarily can get, but he insisted on virtue. He insisted on looking at things down the way they ordinarily would look at. And Plato's student, Aristotle, in the long run, would come to give us the Nicomachean ethics, and we will have the whole idea of Eudaimonia. We'll have the whole idea of the Nicomachean ethics down there. Book 9, Book 10 talks about contemplation and all that. And there's this idea of gradual learning, a kind of a teleological move back to, or getting to these particular ways in which one can begin to enjoy contemplation and enjoy this great sense of virtue. And all through your works, all through what you've written, has captured these particular layers so well. Just like in God and Money, you argue for a theological reflection on money beyond traditional capitalism and socialism. How can Christians, not just Christians, but let's start from Christians, how can Christians rethink their relationship with money in Nigeria and in the global economy today?
Yeah, so yeah, thank you. That's a good question. But unfortunately, I'm teaching at Boston University. I used to teach at Andover Newton Theological School, and it was the premier graduate educational system in the US, because the Puritans have set up Harvard to train pastors undergrad, and then later they set up the theological school for masters. Now the school has merged with Yale, so it's now part of Yale Divinity University, part of the Yale University system. Yale Divinity School, part of the Yale University system. So that's what it. But so when I was brought to that school, I was given an endowed share. Someone endowed the share, especially for this question. Say, how do we need to teach um, Christian economic ethics, theology, to begin to think about the global monetary system of rate and payment, or the whole capitalist or economic system, in line with certain Christian thought and in line with promoting human flourishing, which Aristotle called the eudaimonia for all. And I've taught it now at Boston University. It's also one of the courses that I teach. But you find out that a lot of Christians are committed to social justice and so, but not many of them will take classes in to really actually understand it. No, they don't. So it's the baffling thing that meanwhile economy probably is the biggest part of the spheres of life. Now, everything we do from dry cleaning to even the churches, economics is involved, and money permeates all through. But Christians don't have the. They still believe that, oh, no, that is too technical. Economic issues are too technical. This is not for us. And so they don't even understand money. My God, and money, I said, money is a form of social relationship, right? So you cannot avoid it. That money is based on nothing. And ultimately, what holds any money together is no longer your gold or your silver. It's because another person is going to take it from you. You cannot take your dollar note to euro to the central bank and ask for gold in return. But you accept it because somebody else is going to accept it from you. So basically, it's our collective trust in society, our collective trust in our economic well-being that sustains our currency. The Christians are not invested in that. They don't want to go into that. They just see that part of life, the economic issues to others. And that's why there's so much confusion. I once put together a group of Nigerian pastors. I said, all of you are praying. You say you are Christians, okay? You want to pray that God deliver Nigeria to you. if God were to answer your prayer today, do you have any plan to run the economy? How does and I said, so what happened to you boys? Just pray, let God know, then everybody in Nigeria should be a Christian. I said, if God were to grant that to you, the same thing with the Muslims. I said, if God were to grant that to you, have you people thought through how to run an economic system that will provide human flourishing in harmony for all, so that everybody can be the best that he or she can be, given their God-given talent? Have you guys thought through that? And in addition, have you thought through the fact that if you take over power as Christians or as Muslims, there will still be pockets of Muslims or pockets of Christians, respectively. And that means we are going to live in a pluralistic society one way or the other. And in a pluralistic society, how do you run that society so that you are not brutal, you are not tyrant, because somebody doesn't believe in a religion, you relegate them to the background, or how do you bring them to have a sense of national belonging? So these kinds of national questions are not things Nigerian Christians or African Christians or in many parts of America they talk about, right? They are not really thinking through the effect of what they are doing. They don't think through. Like in the US, we see the Trump tariff, and of course, he has a lot of support from the evangelical and Christian nationalists. So,
as the savior of America, and
but they've not gone through the economic ramification and the ethical implication of all that they're doing. And so the current controversy we're seeing between US and China, I talked about it. There's a chapter on it in my Ghana Money to say China is a rising power and the US dollar cannot be the vehicular and reserve currency forever. There come a time when this kind of clash will happen. And therefore, how do we restructure the global monetary system in a way that it brings equity and justice in the name of God? Because if you believe in God, God is about justice, God is about equity, God is about freedom, human flourishing. So how could the system be organized to justice, equity, and human flourishing for all nations? And I called on America and the West and everybody to say, this is the time to pay attention to creating a system that will promote justice, equity, and eudaimonia at the global level. That you don't wait for one country to overtake another. Once that happens, and I showed how America came in to overtake the system and impose the system, and now John Maynard Keynes in his Bangkok plan in mid 1940s that created the IMF system. He wanted to change that system, but how Roosevelt and Harry White, the assistant treasury assistant secretary for the Treasury Department, changed all that to create a not so democratic system. And I said, this is the time. I published that book 2008. It's almost 20 years.
yeah,
Now the thing is happening, and we're just going back and forth. So when I see Trump and the evangelicals and the Christian nationalists, they're not interested in creating a global monetary system, a global trade and payment system that is fair to all, that will bring in this idea of equality and justice and human flourishing in the name of God for everybody. They're not interested in doing that. They're interested in creating a system that will sustain one nation to the advantage of the other. And I said, if you guys don't get this right, and China do take over at some point, because all the indices are showing that China is at the cusp of taking over, just like the way US was at the cusp of taking over from Britain at the end of the First World War. I said, we're going to be in a very difficult situation. This is the time to create a system like a modified Bangkok plan by John Maynard Keynes that will be good for all. But that's not what they're doing. It's because of this lack of preparedness. If you talk to these Trump supporters, they will look at it only from their national point of view. And they don't care if other Christian nations or other Christians or other sets of human beings are affected adversely. And for me, that is not Christianity. When you are focused only on your country, on your tribe, on yourself, you do not think about the flourishing of all God's children, because everybody in the world is a child of God. They were created by God. And we should have economic ethics that would serve the needs of everybody, not to create monopolies, not to create dominatory system or so. But that is where we are. And that's why I think that people are not really interested in economic ethics, whether in Nigeria or in America, because it calls them to a higher standard. It calls them to approach capitalism with a certain moral presupposition, not to stifle the market, but to say, do we care about human flourishing of every group of people in the world, every human being, irrespective of their gender or their race or their nationality or ethnicity? These are the questions we don't want to handle. And that's why economic ethics, as important as it is, has not fully captured the imagination of the average Christian.
It reminds me of the poem we learned while growing up, "No Man is an Island" by John Donne. A particular line there would say, "No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main." And many persons don't get to see this. And in the end, he would get to say, "Any man's death diminishes me, and because I am involved in the affairs of mankind, and therefore never sent to know whom the bell tolls for. The bell tolls for everybody, and it tolls for me, it tolls for you." And some persons, I've had conversations with people about the whole idea of America first, and they don't see the bigger picture. If your house is well fenced and well gated, and you are the only person, you are the only people who have food enough to eat, you get to see that people will come clamping down the gates and everything down there. And it's the situation you see in Terrazin during the Second World War, the situation you see in Auschwitz, when people ordinarily were struggling to survive, and everybody was just clinging to what they have and all that. And if it works for everybody, it works for everybody. And just like the prayer Jesus said before he died in John 17, may they all be one. Many persons don't want to look at that particular concept of the world being in peace. And there's nothing that shows that we as a people collectively cannot be in peace. You listen to the last speech of the great dictator by Charlie Chaplin, you still see the whole idea of man born with inalienable rights and everybody should get to flourish and all that. And it's a whole lot down there to take. Should churches have a different model of economic engagement from secular institutions, or should they influence it, or should they incorporate it with their day-to-day living?
Yeah, but the question is, they live in a particular economic system, and they have to know how that system works.
But Prof, we don't have, sorry for cutting you, but we don't really have a capitalist system. Even the socialism Professor George Ayeti of Ghana criticized during the 80s and the 90s wasn't really socialism. It was just born in and about a kind of a reaction to what capitalism and what the West did to Africa. And you found many persons just rejecting complete capitalism and all that. So if Professor George should still be here, he would still say socialism in Africa wasn't socialism as it should ordinarily be, and it wasn't envisaged as Karl Marx will have it. But the capitalism we have is like I don't know what to place it. I don't know the name to call it.
That's why I said we don't have capitalist system. We have what we call at best state capitalism, but it's not even exactly
Like a
that.
state capture.
Sure. By the ruling elites, they capture the state and they turn the state to a means of production instead of having the typical means of production that Karl Marx talked about, and being capitalists that would invest and take risks and look for the profit. Because as Karl Marx said, one of the things that drives the development and the progress of the productive forces is because people are trying to invest and make money and looking for the cheapest
Labor.
cost of
Yeah.
production and getting the maximum profit from the market. So they're always trying to innovate. But when you remove all that consideration and somebody can easily make money right? Because he or she gets 10%, 20%, or something even 100%, as a matter of fact, I learned that some state governors get even 120%. Now you ask yourself, Prof, what are you talking about? If this iPhone is $100, how could if a governor embezzles it, why are you saying he makes 120? Your math doesn't work. Anybody that says my math doesn't work doesn't understand Nigeria. Because this is what happens. The governor wants to, he will tell everybody, I want to award this contract. Then he will ask several people who want to get the job to give you 10%. 10, or whatever percentage. We collect from 50, 5 people will get 50%. We collect from 2, they get 120. He will collect their 10%. At the end of the day, then award the contract 100% to himself. So you see, so he has not just made 100, he has made 150, 120, depending on how many people give them their phone. So when you have, and he just sits down there and awards the contract, and he decides what the contract should be, he decides what the amount of contract should be. So there's really no incentive system. Because part of economic system, part of at least what running an economy is, how do you create the incentive system that will motivate people to work and do things that will enable economic development? Right? So, but if that incentive system is destroyed because you've destroyed the calculation of risk and reward. So if you disconnect risk and reward completely or to a very large extent, then you've also destroyed the economy. Why should you go to work and work so hard when you know that at the end of the day, your manager is going to promote that woman or that man because they're children of the governor or so. So you don't work hard. Why should you go to school and read hard when you know that even if you have a first class degree, you are not going to get the job? And somebody with a top class is going to get it, right? So why would you not invest your time? Because let us understand one thing. Max Weber said out the definition of rationality. He said rationality is somebody having a goal end and then aligning his or her needs to achieve that goal. Right. So when you find a young woman, a young man not reading and trying to play hanky panky or give money to the lecturer or even sleep with the lecturer, he said that is foolish. No, because if our goal is to get a certain degree, and she find out that, or the man finds out that there is a way to get it, he manipulates that means to get it. So if you want to reform society, is to disconnect certain means from certain ends. And there is no way you can use money or sex to achieve academic degree. Then human beings will look for a different way. So this idea of risk and reward, means and end system is so important. We forget the basic definition of economics given by Robbins, right? He said it's a study of means and end. Simple. That have a scarcity. That is so key. In Nigeria, we've disconnected means and end. We've disconnected risk and reward. We've disconnected labor from production. We've disconnected money from distribution. All that we've connected is power to corruption, to state capture. And that is where our best brain now function. Anything that a society celebrates will attract the best of its people. And today we celebrate corruption and state capture and politics. You attract, and if you're in the wrong political party, you are really in problem because your business cannot survive. You need the protection of the state, which it shouldn't be. And that's why our businesses are not functioning. See how many businesses have closed down. And then we have all these petit bourgeoisie or comprador bourgeoisie who import resources from outside. So as long as it's easier to make money other than economic needs, we are not going to develop. And that is the issue. A few of us are making money. They are making millions of money. But look at a good number of the millionaires in Nigeria. The billionaires in Nigeria. Investigate them. They made their money because they have access to state power. And if you have the same access to state power, you will also be a billionaire. There are few good ones. I'm not trying to say everybody is bad. But the bulk of people who are parading themselves, as a matter of fact, the ones we see on Fox News, so-called billionaires, they're not really the richest people in Nigeria. They are civil servants, governors or so, who have stolen some money. They've hidden it away. They're never going to get Fox no to declare.
Of course.
Great are the billionaires in Nigeria. If you really understand the system, there are politicians, as governors, these top civil servants, top military officers are way richer than the names you see, Dangote or Tedala or Tony Elumelu that you see.
Yeah.
There are people, and that is a very corrupt system where people are way richer because they were once in government. They are way richer than everybody in their country because they were once in government. And that is not a way to build capitalism. So I agree with you. We are not running a capitalist system. And we never, even in Tanzania or some other place, we never really, or even in Kuruma African socialism or in Yerere, we never really, we did not run a socialist system. We are not committed, wanting to take away. The African ruling class is yet to be committed to economic development of their country. They are committed to expanding their material base, to strengthening their material base, to accumulating money for the next election. They are never really interested in developing the. That's why even I'm not surprised that in many countries that you go, where the ruling class live, you can take your friends from foreign countries and say, well, the rest of my country could be poor, but you could see good buildings here, well maintained. In Nigeria, go to VR, or even go to this Abuja, light, they're all running generators. The streets are filled with people who are selling things for that.
And all that.
Care of their own environment. And then if you go to Banana Republic, where is infrastructure? Is one water clogged? Infrastructure is there. And they're selling houses at such an exorbitant rate that you know that those houses sell because people have money that they stole, and the government is not taxing them, or the government is not properly taxing their property or so. That's why they're selling houses. They don't say 5 million. They say, if you see a 5 million house in America or in France or somewhere, you know you're buying quality. But in Nigeria, they will show you a house for 10 million or more dollars. And it's not better than a middle class neighborhood or low middle class neighborhood in.
No trees, no sewage system, no good road, no drainage, just blocks and glasses.
And then if you look at even the building, it's not even done because often they would have good workmanship. But yet people are spending that money. That means they got that money cheaply, or they're getting it from some monopoly or some access to government, and they're looking for a way to launder that money.
Yeah.
Because the prices they are paying for those houses do not make any sense at all.
Your collection of works down there is so broad that we ordinarily cannot exhaust everything in a short period of time. I appreciate the time we've had here talking about these conversations. It's a recurring trend you get to see and you get to hear from the writings of Kelechi Deka and the different persons who get to write down there. And I know your relationship also with the country and how passionate you have looked at things and how events are. And there's a whole lot of stuff to take down here from our conversation. Our generation have been cheated, and sometimes, if not almost all the time, we as youths, to a large extent, have not come to that consciousness of the stuff we've missed. And even those who travel abroad and go on scholarships and go on grants, at a point need to start sitting down and tell themselves that these grants were made available by the goodwill of other individuals. They weren't money born out of magic. They weren't money, they were not grants gotten from heaven, because it doesn't work. And it's so absurd that sometimes we still see men of God peddle these theories of monies coming from some heavenly central bank, and people don't even sit down to ask very simple questions. Each transaction that gets to happen, there's a transaction linked to it. There are codes generated and all that. So where is that link coming from? Somebody is being, if it ever happens, somebody is being cheated somewhere to give you that money, and our people don't really look at all of these conversations. And Professor, we really appreciate your time with us down here, and we hope that Nigeria gets to flourish and get to be what it can be. And many persons also tell themselves that, Nigeria cannot get better. And I think it's born also out of the situation that a child who has not traveled far thinks the mother is the best cook. Because countries like China, we even talk about here, 89, they were having one of the greatest revolution down there, and today they are where they are. As it concerns human right abuses, it's a conversation for another day, but it's a proof that people can change and that people can grow. Even the United States, even Germany, even Poland, even Czech, and all these countries have gone through different phases, and to accept that change cannot happen is to resign yourself to hopelessness. And what is life without hope? And what would one get to live for if one don't get to hold on to, even if it's a drowning man holding on to straws, it shows a sense of hope. And it's something Nigerians and Africans ordinarily have to come to build amongst themselves and get this spirit going out there. Professor, what words would you leave us with as we conclude these conversations?
Yeah, so as you're saying something, I think sometime last year I wrote an essay for one of the Nigerian columns. So, and I said, I want to tell Nigerians that America is more communalistic than Nigeria. I said, because, and I said Western countries, I said, because oftentimes we in Africa think that, oh, we are much more communalistic than America, they are very individualistic. I said, no, but I said, if like the kind of support they provide for their citizens. I said, what is it? Like you said, people come here and they get scholarship. Often I know that those money are donated by individuals to the university.
Sure.
It's not government money, and people you get scholarship, you get things. When there's hurricane or a disaster, see how citizens will come together and provide. When we say we are communalistic, often that into our own immediate family members. We don't look at our society as the commune or the communality that we are all in. And I wrote and said, look, if you look at it that way, the kind of support, even for the fact that they created a social security system, unemployment system, is a way to nationalize their communal settlements. It's still part of the people bringing their money to help. And I said, until we keep saying we are communal, but we don't even practice good communalism. The same way we don't practice good capitalism, we don't practice good socialism, right? Because we've not come to the realization that the flourishment of every individual is what will make our society great. Yeah, the West has its own problem. There is no doubt. But the scholarship that people get to go to school, if you don't have money, if you don't have an uncle, there's still a way you can go to university. So the system is set up either you take a loan, student aid, or something, or scholarship. Our society is not organized that way, but we keep deceiving ourselves that we are more communally spirited. Now, we actually, in the last 40 years, we even become more individualistic the way we do things. People here will care about the cleanness of the environment because it's part of their communal ethos. But we don't care about the cleanness of our environment in most cases because that's why one of my books, Ethics and Society, I put the context of what they call the Lotus self. I said the Lotus self in Nigeria means that a man or woman is sitting in the midst of death, or whether corruption or devastation, as long as he or she is doing very well. So the question, the lotus flower grows in the midst of death, and it shines, and people say it's holy. No, I said, no, there's something wrong because it's the flower that is shining, but the environment is dirty. So I said, in Nigeria, we have the lotus self, where people are flourishing. Like if you go to the village, the man who built a fantastic mansion, the way So the house is filled with bottles, water. His neighbors are all in thatched houses or so. But he stands at that beautiful mansion, and the man is happy that he's a rich man, he's a big man. That's what I call no to self. Because if you think about your own development, your own beautification, your own betterment, and everybody around you is dead poor, everybody around you is struggling to eat, then what you become a lotus subject. It's not that is not what human flourishing is about. You become a lotus subject. So, and I think that is at the core of what is happening in Nigeria. We've developed leaders that are lotus subject, and even some of us as the followers also think with that mentality. Let me just be good. There used to be an African saying that let the town smell good, have a good odor, let the town have a good scent. Then I, as a citizen, will also smell good, will also have a good scent. But today, people are saying, let them smell good, them alone, and let the whole community have a foul odor also. That is a complete reversal of communalism. And that is the definition of a lotus self. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor, for the wonderful conversation we've had here. It's an eye-opener on a whole lot of issues. It's an eye-opener on Nigeria. It has taken us through memory lane and all that. Thank you for joining us today on Boring Conversations. And the name came about that because many persons have told me that, all my life I've been interested in boring conversations and politics and philosophy and theology and all these things that a young person shouldn't ordinarily get himself into. And for our guests listening to us, I hope you've not had a boring conversation, because Prof has given us a whole lot of stuff and it's not been boring. We have discussed a whole lot. We've reflected on ethics. We've talked about money. We've talked about theology. We've talked about the magic in our society, which has come to affect the ways in which we get to do things. His insights reminds us that building a just and flourishing society requires bold imagination, ethical courage, and a return to our indigenous wisdom with an eye to a teleology on building ourselves and building ourselves forward. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and keep the conversations going. I am Biringkpa. See you in the next episode.